Hello,
Okay.
everybody. Hello,
Hello.
everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the first webinar organized by the Spanish Association for Interdisciplinary India Studies. I am Alejandra Moreno Alvarez, and I will be chairing this first webinar. And I say first because we are going to organize 4 webinars. Today is the first one about dystopic literature. Then in January, we're going to have an art webinar. In February, education and philosophy. And in March, feminism and transnationality. And all this is thanks to the Embassy of India. So we are really happy and grateful for the support of the Embassy of India. This webinar is going to last for 2 hours. So we're going to be together until 7 o'clock. And we're going to have a conversation for 1 hour and 30 minutes, followed by 30 minutes discussion. So I suggest the audience to please write down your comments or questions in the chat. So then at 6:30, I will be able to read the question for the 4 speakers. And in order for things to work properly, I suggest everybody, except of course the 4 speakers, to turn off the mic and to turn off the camera so we have a better connections, because you know what connections are like sometimes. The event will be recorded, it is being recorded now, and it will be uploaded in YouTube. And it's also broadcasted in streaming in Facebook. So please abstain from recording it yourselves, because it's going to be there in YouTube for everybody to see later on. Now I want to welcome our 4 speakers. Antonia Navarro-Tejero, Jorge Diego Sánchez, Prayaag Akbar, and Manjula Padmanabhan. Thank you so much to the 4 of us for being here today to talk about dystopian world. I'm going to briefly introduce the 4 speakers. Antonia Navarro, she has a PhD in English, has lived and lectured in the USA, India, and Spain. She has been teaching cultural studies and South Asian literature at the University of Córdoba, where she chairs the permanent seminar on Indian studies. Among other awards and recognitions, she was a Fulbright Scholar at the University of California in Berkeley, and will be on research leave at Syracuse University, hopefully, we were talking about this before, during the spring and summer semesters in 2020 with Professor Chandra Mohanty. Her research interests include transnational feminist studies, women's movements, body politics, South Asian literature and cultures, and biomedical discourse from a feminist perspective. She is the former president of the Spanish Association for Interdisciplinary India Studies. Welcome, Antonia. Jorge Diego Sánchez is lecturer at the English department of the University of Salamanca, where he teaches literatures and cultures in English language. His research focuses on post-colonial studies, Indian literature and cinema and its diasporas, and art in the Asian subcontinent. He is the secretary of the Spanish Association for Interdisciplinary Indian Studies, and he's also a member of many research projects, like, just to name one, Ratnakara, Indian Ocean Literatures and Culture. Welcome, Jorge. Manjula Padmanabhan, thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome. She's author, playwright, artist, and cartoonist. She grew up in Europe and South Asia, returning to India as a teenager. Apart from her many literary works, which Antonia is going to be referring to, I just want to highlight that she writes a weekly column and draws a weekly comic strip in Chennai's Business Line. She lives in the US with a home in New Delhi.
Thank you.
Prayaag Akbar, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It is an honor. He's an Indian journalist and novelist. Again, Antonia will be talking about his work, but I just want to highlight that he's the author of Laila, which has been highly acclaimed and awarded. The novel was turned into a series on Netflix, directed by Deepa Mehta and co-scripted by Deepa Mehta herself and Prayaag Akbar. His essays and journalism have appeared in leading publications across the world. He's professor of literature at Kriya University. Welcome, Prayaag. So now I'm going to leave the floor to the 4 of you for this interesting conversation that will cover many topics such as war and politics, fear and shame, disdain and resistance, crisis of togetherness, confinement, role of education in a dystopian world. Something really needed to talk about. So thank you so much to the four of you. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll make it now. Thank you so much, Sandra. Just let me, because this got freezed. Just give me a couple of minutes. Okay.
Of course, there is not a hurry. It's Friday afternoon, morning, night, depending where you are. And we are really, all of us really looking forward to spend the evening with you. So
morning for me.
Morning for you, a night for Prayaag. Yeah.
It's really very exciting to be living in this fragmented world where we can still meet on a tiny screen in our different homes. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing.
It is. It is.
Yep.
You're sharing now? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Sandra. And good evening, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're connected from at this time around the globe. My pleasure and my privilege to be here surrounded by such wonderful writers, Manjula and Prayaag, and outstanding scholar, Jorge. We will be familiar using the first names, if you don't mind. Yeah,
sure.
And there's so many other colleagues in the audience and students. So welcome, everyone. We are so much honored when Manjula Padmanabhan accepted to be part of this webinar, The Dystopian World. She's no doubt a prolific author who was born in Delhi and currently divides her time between India and the US. She's a journalist, as Sandra stated before, an acclaimed playwright and comic strip artist. She is the creator of the popular character Suki, who you can see on the screen. She's the author also of amazing children's book, including, among others, Mouse Attack, my favorite, and the illustrator of many others. So I wish I had enough time to tell you more details about them all, but I guess I'll have to focus on the topic of our what brought us together today. She has published a few collections of short stories too, a semi-autobiographical novel that talks about how a young woman illustrated in Mumbai, if I'm wrong, and a dystopian saga. So Manjula got international recognition here. As a playwright after receiving the Great Onassis Award for her play Harvest, but this was only her fifth one. This year, all her plays has been published in one collection entitled, the cover you can see in the, on your screen, entitled Blood and Laughter, which I encourage you to get if you're interested in science fiction and social commitment issues. I will not introduce to you all of them, all of the plays that are included in this wonderful edition, but let me briefly focus on a few ones only because we will mention them in our conversation later on. Yeah. So this collection includes Lights Out, which is that will be a symbolic title, which may mean the indifference society pays towards criminal acts committed against women, such as gang rapes, or the Mating Game Show, which got the foundation for a TV serial film by the acclaimed filmmaker Govind Nihalani, and was originally entitled The Dowry Show. And Harvest, that you have read, my students should be there, that you have read, which is we could say futurist plays about the selling of body parts and exploitation between the developed and developing countries, which was also made into an award-winning film by Govind Nihalani entitled The Hum. Then the Laughter and Blood is the other part of the 2-volume compendium that was published this year. which brings together all short performances pieces. This is so much needed to be done. So I have to thank Manjula for having done it, and also Hachette India, the publishing house, because we finally got all her prolific work in just 2 volumes. In her plays, Manjula's, she also published 3 short collections of short stories, where she explored science fiction and extraterrestrial unfolding as dystopian dramas, among other different social, political, and cultural conflicts that are unfortunately timelessly urgent. And finally, why doesn't it? I don't know why this is not okay. I will briefly introduce her dystopian saga. Here, identity politics intertwine with how fundamentalists conceive a world without women, as men in the dystopian text can self-clone, and some of them are transformed through vaginoplasty into transsexuals for the genital pleasures. So family honor is looked into when families that offer their women to be publicly and violently killed off are rewarded with thrones. And the oldest girl survivor is taken to the island of Lost Girls as her chance of long-term survival rests with her being transported into the world beyond through a long, dangerous journey across a wasteland. The island is a place of experiment where gender is flux, even though the overwhelming essence remains female. A place of relative safety for the mutilated women and transsexuals of the world. But like all ghettos, it has its own dark secrets, its power relations and hierarchies and its codes. Okay, and we are so much honored also with the presence of Prayaag Akbar, who is a writer, journalist, and lecturer at Prague University. As a journalist, he has been an editor of Scroll India, which is an independent website covering diverse topics, and has published many pieces dealing with politics, literature, media. He wrote Layla in 2017, which won the Crossword Book Award and the Tara Literary Life First Book Award. And the novel also was shortlisted for the Hindu Literary Prize. Layla tells the story of a mother, Shalini, who is looking for her missing daughter. There is a totalitarian regime in India and the population is running out of drinking water. Shalini is taken away from her family and sent to a purity camp, and yet she embarks on this journey to rescue her daughter, or at least make sure that she is alive. In so doing, Shalini confronts and fails and discerns the dividing structures of the so-called future India, which faces problems that can be related nowadays. Layla became a showrunner for Netflix, which bought the rights of the novel. And Deepa Mehta was approached to direct its adaptation as a VOD series and became its creative executive producer. The show was released in June last year and was adapted by Urmi Juvekar, Suhani Kambar, and Patrick Graham. The episodes are directed by Deepa Mehta, Shankar Raman, and Pranav Kumar, okay, to give you all the credits. So having said that, my colleague Jorge will introduce the topics we will be discussing today with the authors. I'm also honored to have been working with him on this webinar for the last few months and till very few minutes ago. And we hope to share with you its publications sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, almost, Prayaag for you. Good morning for you, Manjula.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe even good morning for some of the students who are here, who knows what. It is a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Antonia. We are using our first names. Thank you, Tony, for leading us and for, getting the torch through these webinars and these ventures. So thank you for, getting this space for us to meet And obviously, thank you, Manjula and Prayaag, for your writings. I remember reading your play, Manjula, when I was finishing my degree together with a play called Monsoon, and I was like, boom, boom. So I hope that my students and the people around can get that boom with your plays. So thank you for being here. And Prayaag, what can I say about you? I think you were one of the last persons I hacked in real life. Honestly, I think that was the case, right? And yeah, thank you for being here, Prayaag, and being such a figure in the last years to allow us to see India through, to look at India for what it is. Also, I want to thank Alejandra Moreno Alvarez, who is firing up another torch here, that of guiding us and making us respect the time and our turns. So I'm gonna quickly introduce the 6 topics that we are going to deal with in this webinar. So when Antonia and I were talking about this, we can see people going on YouTube in 2 months to get some sort of inspiration or to get some sort of guidance when they are writing papers, when they don't know what to read, when they Google Manjula Padmanabhan, or when they Google Prayaag Akbar. So in case you are following us alive or you are tuning in from whichever place, whenever on YouTube, I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna offer a quick, is this working? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see if it is working. Yes. So from these 2 authors that we have today with us, Manjula Padmanabhan and Prayaag Akbar, and their stories. Our aim is to look at contemporary India beyond its limits. And it is through this conversation that we want to talk about the world. We can say that it is a dystopian world, but nowadays, let's say we're going to talk about the world, and we are going to articulate our conversation around 6 axes or 6 topics. So the idea is to be able to discern, among trees, among scaffoldings, among buildings, among polluted air, polluted air, and everything within the world. So we are going to start dealing with the topic of walls and politics. Walls are symbols in your work, Manjula and Prayaag, and politics and your political commitment is something that it is there. And it is through your stories that we can recognize walls and we can discern our political positionality. Then we also will be tackling on the topics of fear and shame. So how affects can allow us to see the world, to be used to see the world, to be felt as part of the world, or to be instrumentalized as part of shame that is created by others, by us, by several systems, by a reality which seems to be featured, but in the end it's not, and so on. Then we will be talking about dissent and resistance, and we believe that your work is a source of many questions and many leads on how to articulate dissent and resistance, which are 2 necessary actions and ideas nowadays. Also, we will be thinking about the current crisis of togetherness. We are talking at different times. We are talking from different parts of the world, and we are not wearing masks, but outside everywhere they are wearing masks, and there are lockdowns, curfews, and so on. And crisis is a noun that is repeated, as well as togetherness is a noun that is not that repeated, but that we should think about, and that I'm sure that will be present in our discussion today. Then we are going, obviously, to be referring to the current confinement and lockdown, something very dystopian that is not that dystopian. So we hope to talk about that. And then we want to foster and we want to deal with the role of education in all these topics. what can we do? What can we read? What can we share? What can we learn? So as we can go beyond, or we can go through, or despite whatever that is going on, we can see the world, look at the world, and read and participate in the world. So this is the aim of this conversation, and this is what we suppose is going to be the fruitful conversation after this. So welcome all, and make sure that you stay with us, and this is the start.
Great. So how would you like to enter the subject? Would you like Prayaag and myself to read from our works right away, or would you like to propose? In fact, I think, Jorge, if you propose a question that Prayaag and I can then, respond to.
Yeah.
So, because you gave us such wonderful questions, Jorge, I looked through all of them and I ticked off some that I preferred and others a little less so. But why don't you propose a question that we can then answer one by one?
Yeah, it's actually, Manjula, it's gotten even more wonderful because Antonia has been reworking on them so that we engage in a conversation. So it's actually her who is going to open the floor with a question for you two, okay?
All right. Yes, we'll just pose questions, both of us, Jorge and me, general questions for both of you. All right? Just by giving concrete examples from your work. We're all connected from different parts of the world. Manjula is in the US right now. She's 6 hours behind us. Prayaag is 4.5 hours, right? Ahead of us. I wonder where the audience is from. I'm not quite sure. I've seen photos there from the US also. And this is all wonderful. And thanks to this advanced technology that we'll all be able to be here today and share a few thoughts and readings from you. How do you cope with that? That will be my first question. That, like, for example, Prayaag, are you teaching online like Jorge and me, or Manjula? I know that you have a comic strip where you become small like Alice in Wonderland.
Yes,
with webinar sessions.
Yes.
Both cope.
That wasn't me. That was her. That was not me.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So how are you coping with this situation, with all this, so many webinars?
I like many I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, that for Prayaag and myself, we are both people who write, who work, typically work alone. It's in terms of coping with the isolation, that's fine. What is a little tiring is the web connections that require, I find it, looking at the camera the whole time is, one has to get used to that. I'm unlike newsreaders, I'm not used to being seen so much. I don't socialize much. I don't go to parties. I prefer not to be invited to parties. I don't go out much. So it's what has been most unusual in this year, when everyone has been isolated, is that I think I have been more visible than I have ever been before. So it's an irony. But maybe Prayaag with his students has a different experience. I feel that Prayaag's microphone is not on. Yeah, we can see you. We can see you. Can't hear you. Antonia, I don't hear Prayaag.
Yeah, we cannot hear him, but he's not mute. So it should be a problem with his mic from his computer, I guess. Oh, now he's, yeah.
Okay.
he left the room, I guess, to prove and try it again.
Well, sometimes you have to shut down to to reboot the system. Sometimes that happens.
He left, and he'll be back, I guess, with
So I could ask you a question. I'm interested to know how your students find their way towards your topics. I mean, what brings your students to be studying about India?
In my case, we have a course during this semester about Asia in general. Yes.
There, I think Prayaag is online now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is this
Hello?
better?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Great.
Done some things. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we were talking about, well, this is a great example of all the things that can go wrong when you're teaching online and speaking online and all of that. But all in all, I actually quite enjoyed teaching online. It's a strange experience to be, especially I was teaching creative writing, and when you don't get to work with the students in person, it's a little disconcerting. But because I feel it is a medium that relies on a lot of personal engagement. But I was glad to be able to have just to have the opportunity to teach at all, because who knew in April or May what was going to happen in terms of if classes were going to happen. And universities in India has been so bad with COVID that universities weren't sure. So I'm glad for the students that they got that that they got to have their term, and we still managed to teach. Overall, I don't know what your experience has been of teaching online. How's it? Are you all teaching online fully in Spain, or is it a mix of both? In Spain?
It is a mix. I mean, I'm teaching online now in the whole region of the south of Spain. We recently moved to the online way. So, but
however,
it depends on the state. Yeah.
However, for us, we're having face-to-face education, and we've got a class with 92 students in class, so or 92 masks. Yeah.
I mean, it's that kind of year, isn't it? It's been as you said, I think in the introduction you were talking about how it's been almost dystopian, the year itself. And in the original set of questions, I think Jorge, you'd said that I didn't like the term dystopia very much for my book, and it's true. I don't like it very much. I didn't like it very much because I felt dystopia, like, it creates this illusion that we're very far away from the world that is being described, and I felt my book was quite close to reality. And now everyone is kind of living in a dystopia altogether, and there's no getting away from it. So I feel like it's a pretty accurate descriptor of my book right now, because I feel we're all in this together, and it's been a strange one this year.
Well,
Yeah.
Jorge,
Okay, yes. So that's actually, so we are going through this world pandemic. And I remember, Prayaag, when I read the cover of your book, and that what attracted me to it. Camila Samsi wrote that Leila shows us a future that is both highly imaginative and all too believable. And in June, Manjula, you stated for the Times of India that we lived in a surreal, dystopian present. Which of the elements in your novels do you see believable or maybe even intensified in this lockdown and in the future that is yet to follow in India?
I think it's easier for me to talk about two elements. One is when I wrote Harvest, that was in 1996. At that time, we did not even have we did not have FaceTime, we did not have Skype, and that play introduces the concept of face-to-face connections through an electronic device. Today, and when I look at my novel, The Island of Lost Girls, what the events in The Island of Lost Girls is many years into the future, I have avoided specifying a particular year. And there is a complete collapse in the island. It's not, whereas today we are connected, in Ireland, there are no connections between the various cultures. There's certainly no commerce. And what has happened in that novel is that the oil fields have been blown up. So in fact, there was early in the earlier book, you hear that there's been some devastation caused by a virus that affects cement concrete. So buildings have collapsed all over the world. So the world of these two novels is ahead, and is far less connected than what we have now. And the questions to be asked about those novels is, how does one manage when people are mostly illiterate, when they are not connected by any means, but they can't even really write notes, because most people, there's no paper. You realize when society has broken down, you don't have things, no one in these novels drinks tea or coffee, because those things are not there. It's not clear, what they're making, by what means they're remaining clothed, because, as I said, there are all the industrialized products that we're used to are not in that novel. So my work spans two completely different levels of technology.
Do you mean that there's this kind of interplay between like a kind of technologically regressive world and this highly advanced society?
Well, one of the things that I realized as a result of your questions, Jorge, is some of the experiences in Ireland are really more specific to what millions of immigrants are facing. They are stripped of their lives, their normal lives, or whatever used to be a normal life. They have very, very little in the way of material possessions. And I would say that in Ireland, that you experience the sense of being completely disconnected from from whatever you considered normal. So even though I did not set out to write about the immigrant experience, and I'm not going to pretend it is about immigration today, but it speaks to an extremely disordered time. And Jorge, you mentioned the interview that in which the headline was about living in a dystopic world. I absolutely believe, of course, the headline suggests that I live in a dystopic world. I don't think it's only me. I mean, we are all living in a dystopic, surreal situation. And many of us, at least when I say many, I mean the small number of percentage of those of us who live in urban spaces, we cling to the notion that the way we live now is normal, but I'm not sure that I would agree. I think we are all struggling with essentially dystopic realities. And Prayaag, I think, will be able to tell us much more from the marvelous evocation he provides us of what it is like to live with this kind of unbearable oppression. I found that really, really deep and powerful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Manjula. That means just everything to me. That you think that you read the book, all of it. It's just wonderful. I mean, I've learned from your work for, I think the first, I remember reading Lights Out as quite a young man, and really just remarkable, and you have this uncanny, we talked about this when we spoke on the phone just this week, but you have this uncanny, almost predictive power, because when was Lights Out? I saw in the presentation, was it 84? Something like that?
The events occurred in 1984. I wrote the play in 1984. It was first performed in 86, I think.
Okay, performed in 86. But, I mean, I think when 2012 happened, there was that horrific incident. And, And I was
Right.
working in Bombay at the time when there was a very sad incident happened with this photojournalist in Time Out. And,
Yes,
it
yes,
was,
I'm aware of that.
and I kept going back to your play and going back to, what you were trying to say with that in terms of, it's not just that, it's all of us, how we all have to turn away from things and how we all have to just to be able to continue. And when in Laila, that was one of the things that I really wanted to try and get at is that, one person's dystopia can be another person's even utopia. Some people really want this thing, this world as it is. Many people want that, and the dystopia can be I mean, it can be this horrible reality for one person. And Shalini, who's at the center of my story, it is very much a dystopia for her. She's been, she's been separated from her daughter. Her husband's been taken from her. All her, the world that she knew has kind of collapsed. But most of the rest of her contemporaries, most of the rest of her friends are living in this. I mean, it's a totalitarian world, but they're kind of on the privileged end of it. So they're able to really, they're worried that if they speak out, or if they if they say too much, it's going to, they're going to lose that privilege. They're going to lose that little cocoon of privilege that they're in. And this is, part of the problem for Shalini, of course, in terms of finding her daughter. But I think that was really one of the things that, living in a country like India, and I'm very much inspired by Delhi, and where I grew up, in Bombay, where I spent a lot of time. The book was definitely inspired by that. And I think what happens is, you're confronted by that all the time, that my comfortable existence is just concurrent with someone's, very dire circumstances. And, we have poverty, we have disease is rife. And, it is kind of, you always have to play this out because, we're entitled to try and find happiness and comfort and, and all of that in your life. But as a young man, you feel very angry about it. And, you're like, how can this be that, that I can have this comfortable life and someone else can't, or someone else has a dystopic reality? And then, you grow a little older and you realize that's just the world, or that's just life.
That is so much interesting, because this morning in my class, well, one of my students, because I was asking them, okay, do you have questions for the authors this evening later on? And then one of them said, Antonia would like to ask them, what I feel is that somebody's dystopia is somebody else's utopia. So right, what you just said, right? So very interesting. And do you both think that then, like, working with science fiction, and more concretely with the dystopian genre, could be a comfortable scenario to deal with the social issues? There are many in your works, such as Sati or Dori or caste or the environmental ruin, technological control, government oppression. I mean, all those topics are there in your works. Since it offers a more, like this genre would offer a more detailed or more, I would say, clear vision of important human and social issues that affect us all. And also warn the readers about a possible apocalyptic future in a way that will lead us to the cataclysmic decline in our society. You think that you feel more comfortable with the genre due to that?
If I could address that, I would say that the overwhelming reason I write science fiction is that I feel it gives me more freedom to address subjects without having to refer to specific political entities. I can speak I can refer to general and broad issues rather than specifics, because both Prayaag and I belong to a culture which is really not interested in being criticized right now. And it hasn't for a very long time. And we can see all over the world, there is a huge clamping down on dissent, and even, never mind dissent, critique. And I believe, the task that writers and poets and filmmakers and artists perform of being like, I consider the duty of the arts and artists to be like doctors who can name the disease. Well, we are not being allowed to name the disease. And as a result, using science fiction is one of the ways of going around it, going around the fact that we cannot name the problems in our cultures. And I think science fiction, even though I'm very aware that many readers, many series readers detest science fiction because they find it a kind of adult fairy tale. And I'm often asked by my contemporaries, why I choose the genre. Because yes, it means that you can stretch the boundaries of reality, and it can, to some people, that is extremely unpleasant. It's just unattractive to read fictions that are fictional about the real world. But I have found it a much more flexible method of discussing large subjects. Over to you, Prayaag.
I think you're absolutely right, Manjula. It's a very interesting question. I think a lot of it has to do with a kind of it's like an inborn, not an inborn censorship or self-censorship, but like what would be palatable in your society. You know what ideas you can express in what way, and how close to the bone you can actually get. And I wouldn't really think of my book as science fiction because I don't have a lot of technology in there. There's not a lot of advance in technology in this world that I'm showing. It's more like a social disintegration. But it did allow me to be able to, and as Manjula said, as writers, you were not trying to talk about a specific politician or talk about a specific movement. It's more about what are the things that politician represents. What is it that allows them to wield this kind of power? What is it that allows them to reach these kind of authoritarian positions? And once you can look at that, once you're able to look past specific people and look at the systems behind those people, the systems behind it. I used to say, so in my country, which is we have a Hindu nationalist government in power, which is clamping down on all sorts of freedoms, especially for writers, not especially for writers, but along with many other people, writers. It is something that people have asked me, why weren't you explicit in your book about this being a Hindu totalitarian state? And I was like, it's not so interesting to me to write about a Hindu totalitarian state. I'm much more interested in writing about totalitarianism. I'm much more interested, that is an ideology that someone can ride to power, but it's not, these ideologies are interchangeable. You use them, Donald Trump can use white nationalism, and Boris Johnson can use apparently British nationalism and come to power. And, not to say that these people are all at the same degree of whatever they're doing, but my point is that these are ideologies that you can actually strip away and see real common elements. And I think the last few years politically has shown us how similar someone like Bolsonaro is in Brazil or Erdogan is in Turkey. And these people are all espousing, what seem to be different ideologies. The one's a Muslim nationalist in Turkey, and there's a Hindu nationalist in India, and, Brazilian. I don't know what Bolsonaro is, but, he's definitely a right-wing nationalist. And, but what you come to see is that all these people are kind of using the same modalities of speech, using the same methods of enraging people, of enticing people, of getting people onto their side. And, what writing in a genre like science fiction or speculative fiction allows you to do is really move above your society, the specifics of your own society almost. And even if you're writing about that society, you can write about something a little bigger, something more common that all of us share, like as human beings, and as opposed to, this is what happened in Bombay on this and this date.
Absolutely. And all these political leaders sound as dehumanizing as frightening as the communities that both of you have imagined in your works. So when Antonia and I were working on the questions, I want to make clear that it was both of us working and rephrasing our own questions constantly. So we were pointing out that, you know, the communities that you imagine are dehumanizing and frightening. And we were feeling as readers dehumanized and frightened. So for instance, Manjula, in the play Lights Out or in the mating game show Sexted, you know, there are like topics such as gang rape, sexual assault, rape, and so on. And for instance, in Leila, we open with wall, you know, and then we read respect to the walls. And then there are all these devotees waiting and carrying out rituals, and clothes and sexuality seem to express how fear and shame are imposed and instrumentalized on the physical as well as on the spiritual bodies of the characters. And the reaction that we as readers have, and that our students as readers have, is that all these descriptive and explicit characters are terrifying, unsettling, as well as disturbing. So it is actually what you wanted to raise in your readers, so that they could somehow be inspired into action or brought them into activism. Or why? You know, because we often get this reaction, oh gosh, this is terrifying, or no, I'm not reading this, I'm gonna be petrified.
Yes, I've often been asked, you know, why, this is something I'm asked very often, why do I write about such dark issues? And I am also often told, I appear to be a very, you know, I don't appear to be morose or depressed myself. So why do I focus again and again? I have to say two things. One of the reasons is because to me, it's not something, you know, something that I don't see. I see it all the time. So in the way of a photographer who takes pictures of what there is, of course I have to be doing that. I have to. However, I want to refer to the last time I was in Spain, which was a couple of years ago, to attend a wonderful seminar on utopia. The Utopian Society had very kindly invited me. And I came away from that 3-day seminar amazed and delighted, really, to understand how just talking about utopia was lifting. It lifted the spirits. All of us, I think we all felt touched, and the seminar has been going on for many years. I began to think I began to think again about my focus. And I would like to hope, I can't be sure, obviously, because I'm now writing the 3rd book in the Escape Island series. I would like to hope that some part of the lightness I felt at the time of being immersed in discussions of utopia, some part of that has remained with me. I do think that while we are all oppressed by the sense of mounting dystopia, it's not that it will be in the future. We are living in a dystopian world. I think it's also, have understood, it is also important to talk about the hopes that lie ahead, and also not just ahead. I think in both my books, even though the events around the characters are dark, I would say, particularly in Island, there is a great deal of what I consider a type of humor.
I do. So I wonder, sorry, I just wanted to ask you a question, Manjula.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Have you found it, not easier, but have you found it, which do you find easier to conceive? The sort of the brighter elements of your world or the darker elements of your world? I mean, I wonder, is it something, does one come easier than the other?
Well, you know, on stage it's much easier to cry than to laugh. But I would say it's very, you know, the problem of writing sort of light-hearted narratives is I cannot help but be aware that when we are surrounded by so much despair, to be speaking entirely about, oh, how nice it is for me, is incredibly smug. And I hope not to be doing that. I hope to be talking about the way that pleasure and humor and the warm side of life is with everybody. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be privileged to live with joy. And I hope some part of that comes through even in the books the work I've already produced. But maybe my now great age, I'm 67, I feel it is, you know, a good time to start to look up rather than just down.
Yeah, that's thank you so much.
Jorge.
Yeah, actually, that's I love the titles that you gave to the 2 volumes of the collection of the plays and performances. Blood and laughter, laughter and blood. Yeah, which is kind of what you're just saying. All your works, Manjula and Prayaag, use dystopia as a literary technique to discuss reality, as we are saying. That can challenge, in a way, readers to think differently about social and political climates. And I'm actually reading the chat, and we have one participant saying, and I'm quoting the person, science fiction generates metaphors and allegorical structures that allow reality to be addressed at different levels through imaginative critique. So very much something clear in your work addresses the reader, adult reader actually, is that you're particularly interested in exploring like the exploitation of the powerless by the elite using technology, for example, but also resistance to the neo-colonial dimension of technoculture. In many of your pieces, there is a kind of Faustian pact to exchange a body part. And give an example, like the organs in Harvest, or penis in Youngest in the saga, for lifelong happiness and salvation. Salvation is very important. So there are some technological innovations that provoke social changes in India, right? How do you think that all this is affecting humanity?
Well, I constantly refer I think in all of my work, I now, you know, I can look back on a number of large number of stories and narratives that I've written. I return again and again to the subject of the body, and I think it's terribly obvious that for me, the body rather than the country is or any country is the subject of my interest. And I would say that the way in which characters in my work often either lose something or I would say gain something. And I would say that in The Island of Lost Girls, you pointed out, I mean, you said right now that he loses his penis, but I would say that he gains a woman's body because he conducts the story. The entire book is conducted through as he uses a body that he has been forced to change to a woman's body. He didn't choose to, he had to, in order to do what he has to do in the book. And I would say that as we are aware of how it's not in his mind, it's not in the first person, but we are aware of what he thinks as he lives, as he gets used to this body. And I would say it is not a cutting off, it is an adding. he is given the privilege of living within the other body. And I found it, for me also, it's a kind of traveling, isn't it? I mean, each time I introduce a character who is very different to myself, it is like traveling into that other dimension, the other dimension of another person. And I would say that in The Island of Lost Girls and in Escape, I would say that the character youngest is the one whom I'm closest to. And I think it is not a small consequence that I'm one of 3 sisters and I am the youngest. So to some extent, I realized that though people tend to be closed off in the way they think about characters because of the polarity of maleness and femaleness. Most people reading my books would imagine that I would identify with the daughter Meiji, but I would say much more I identify with youngest. And I really only thought about this today or yesterday when I was looking at Jorge's questions, thinking, Antonia's questions, thinking that I had never actually had this thought that my main character is called youngest. That's the name given to him. And that's what I am.
Yeah. And apart from this, there is always, communication, either as an instrument or as mass media or as a product of surveillance that somehow monitors, creates fear, is able to control us, and at the same time is somehow expecting submission and subordination, right? By this constant monitoring, almost conceived as a novelty, right? Like, for instance, we can think in the Interplanta company in Manjula's work, or we can see about how the society in Leila are created. So all this submission and subordination, and the surveillance is created at the expense of whom? Who is there? So, for instance, I was reading the other day the work of Anupama Mohan and how she studies the concept of homotopias, are places where similarities are enhanced to provide these sort of identities. How do you think that your dystopian world is based on these homotopias? And so we can either understand the dynamics that control us or somehow rebel against them. What can we do about this as well?
Jorge, I was very curious because I saw that in your list of questions, and I was very curious about this concept of homotopias, which I hadn't encountered before. So, is the author describing? Is it like an anthropological kind of study? Or is it a fiction study? Is she doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So departing from anthropology, she studies works of literature, and yeah.
So, and could you tell me some books that are like homotopias, or something that I might?
Yeah. So, for instance, instead of giving you exact names, places or social orders where difference cannot be uttered. So you have to belong to this religion. If not, you are outside. Right. You have to qualify yourself within this gender. If not, you don't qualify. That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like my country. No, we have
absolutely.
We have a lot of. I suppose that in a way that describes a lot of fiction that delves into totalitarian worlds and all of that, because it does seem that one of the factors that governments are really threatened by is any form of dissent and social dissent. And you can look at dissent as something on the road, but it's people going out on the street and marching and things like that. But dissent can also be a very personal, intimate thing, in the sense that you can also rebel against overarching forces from your everyday actions, from everything, from every choice you make. And I think that is what most, so when we use the term dystopia, I mean, it's all about controlling that, being able to control that level of dissent. That's what governments seem to be most interested in suppressing. And I don't really understand why it is that these what are called strongman governments, or these governments by these very all. Actually, I think Hannah Arendt wrote about this very well, if I remember correctly, where she said that because if it's a personality cult, these people run personality cults, and if it's a personality cult, then any one person speaking up against the personality can prick that bubble. So they have to. Any one person is a threat to the regime, because you have even a pinprick of dissent can actually burst the bubble. And so I thought that was very that probably explains why there's so much surveillance and so much so much monitoring. That's why governments feel the need to monitor so much. And I think we saw this year in 2020, we saw how governments reacted to the pandemic. Right, it became all about more surveillance. I mean, I think people who read my book might not think this, but I like to think of myself as quite an optimistic person. Like, I like to think of myself as someone who sees the best. And at the start of the pandemic, I certainly, I was very excited, because I thought, oh, here's this disease that sort of like, hops across borders. Like it makes a mockery of national borders. It doesn't, it makes a mockery of class difference, because we think we're protected from things by our social wealth, or economic wealth, or social capital, or whatever it is. But in truth, we're not actually protected. When it comes to a disease like this was a great leveler. This brought rich and poor together, were threatened at first. It seemed like that, and national borders didn't seem to matter anymore. Someone could bring it across. You didn't know. To me, it felt like a transnational moment. It felt like a global moment, that we were all going through this together. And this was right at the start of the year. And then, very quickly it became about nationalism. It became about parochialism. Even within our society, it became about rich and poor, and it became about, we have a community in the northeast of India who has, sort of a lot of facial similarities to Chinese people, and they were just being racially abused in India. It was really, really sad, and because people were frightened of the Chinese virus or whatever it is. So even when you have these moments of where you feel that there's hope, the governments quickly clamp down, and they quickly try and suppress it, and quickly try and sort of curtail the natural evolution of our natural desire for freedoms, and governments find that so threatening. And I think this year has just illustrated that though we all live in democratic societies, or ostensibly democratic societies, where it's amazing how similar everyone's response was. More surveillance, more sharpen the borders, sharpen the clamp down on any kind of dissent, clamp down on any minority groups. In India, Muslims were targeted. In America, blacks were targeted. Chinese people were targeted. It's a sad indictment of humanity.
Yeah, I can see your point, Prayaag. There are many scholars, and even my students have also made a question to me. They get the feeling, when we're dealing with the unit on dystopian narratives, get the feeling that this could be like a modern way of Christian morality, in a way, when one questions the limits of globalizing tendencies. Even though the popular myth of progress through technological innovation has become an integral part of us. So it seems that in all these works, you raise a series of questions on the moral, the ethical, or the legal issues that are involved in power relations. Yeah. With assistance of biotechnology, obviously, and technoculture. For instance, the notions of hygiene are brought up in both your works, and in both sense, not only physically, but also morally, that it will be more related to purity, right? Hygiene is like related as a metaphor of purity. So, and this will be pretty much also related to what we're going through, as you just mentioned, Prayaag. Do you think that we really need, like humanity, really need those aseptic sites? Like we want everything to be crystal clear, like clean and germ-free, virus-free, you know, that kind of purity in a way, to be more symbolic, if you can.
I mean, it was a big theme in my book because, you know, that is, I don't know, I see you have those beautiful illustrations behind you on the wall. And I wonder if you've traveled in India because, you know, in India, if you go into rural, I mean, anywhere, you'll see a lot of these restaurants will say pure veg, you know, 100% pure veg and things like that, meaning vegetarian. And I became very interested in that idea because, you know, of course, there's an association of purity and vegetarianism because of things like caste, but there's also, you know, the idea that 100%, I was very taken by this 100% pure, you know, and this constant need to feel clean inside and outside. And I think it's a presiding concern of caste. You know, the caste system is obsessed with cleanliness and purity, and this is one of the reasons why, you know, the inside of Indian homes are very clean, and the outsides are, you know, our roads are very dirty, and our cities are filthy. It's, you know, and I think that in India we seem to believe that. I mean, until today, if you go onto a website, I don't know if in Spain, people use this website called Quora, where you can ask questions about each other. And I'm doing some research, you can ask questions of each other. I'm doing some research for my next book. And, you know, there's someone who's talking about, there's a Gotra in India called Kashyaps. And, you know, I was doing some research and they were like, you know, if I'm this kind of Gotra, can I marry this person? And, you know, until today, it's engineers and, you know, young people are talking about the purity of the blood and being like, oh, you know, because you're from this Gotra, you have this, your blood cells have 100% pure. And, you know, it's this kind of mad, you know, illusion of science, you know, this kind of how people use the metaphors of science to, you know, to bolster their own kind of cack-minded ideologies, you know, and ideas. And it's, you know, I think that science, of course, has brought us to so many, you know, has brought us so many goods. But I think that what, you know, there's this kind of darkness and light to it. Like, I think it's just darkness and light to human beings that projects onto things like science and industry and things like that. You know, it's kind of an internal thing that then gets pushed out onto the world. So it's not literally science, you know, that has the darkness and light. It's much more us and ourselves.
Actually, Manjula, this is something that you explore, right? How technology is used to control bodies, women's bodies, surrogacy, and what can you add in relation to this?
I notice whenever I'm asked to talk that there's often an effort to swing towards feminine issues and feminine topics of feminism, and from the time that I was in my late mid 30s, I have been actually looking away from feminist issues because I believe amongst the many ways in which we are becoming fragmented is we are beginning to think of men and women and of course the many other genders as separate entities. And I have become very keen, at least for myself and the way I think, to broaden so that we don't, and the problem I have with even the word feminist is that unfortunately, even though I know that feminists and feminism attempts to be broad-based, it's very difficult not to associate the movement, unfortunately, with only women. And even for myself, I find that my focus has broadened to the extent that I really don't see, if someone talks about a problem involving women, I always think, but why aren't we talking about the problems that men face? Because we, just as we have horrific crimes against women, we don't even begin to address the tragedy and the trauma of men. I don't mean sexual crimes. I mean, of course, in one sense they are. The way that men are routinely ignored at the level of the problems, the psychological problems and the social problems that affect men specifically, don't get the same kind of attention. And I wonder if that doesn't, because of the nature of human society, that causes in some ways the attacks on women, because women get so much attention in one sense. And it is disturbing and difficult to even talk about these issues, because we have become so polarized that sometimes it feels as if we are all, talking at cross purposes and forgetting that the point of discussion is to reach a higher consensus, not less. And I'm often, and perhaps, I don't think I do it consciously, but I would say that in my work, I'm not really privileging only women. I think my work, in a very deep sense, privileges more than one gender. And of course, one, as authors, and I think Prayaag and I were talking about that, we don't have that much control over how we are interpreted. If we had our own way, I'm sure we would like to say, why don't you look at this, not at that, because quite often I find, I will be platformed alongside specifically other women. And I think there's no hope if we can't have discussions which include rather than exclude.
It's a great point, Manjula. And I think, it goes back to what you said earlier about also as the role of a writer is to sit in someone else's, to disembody yourself and sit in someone else's body almost. And I think that, that's, as a writer, you want to challenge yourself. I remember when I started writing my book, I wanted to write in the voice of a woman. I was quite young, I was 28 or so, and then I wanted to write in the voice of a 43-year-old woman. It wasn't the easiest thing, of course, but I didn't feel like it was an insurmountable challenge. I didn't think that I couldn't imagine, what it was like. Of course, it was probably, the folly of youth or whatever, but I did think that I could, and because I think that there are, of course, lots of differences between the genders, but there's also things that unite us in very, very important ways, and that is, our experience of the world in one way, but there is certainly something to be said for writers to imagine it, and I took inspiration from writers, of course, like Manjula, and then so many other writers who've been able to cross these boundaries in their work, and I think that's one of the jobs of fiction, is to be able to show similarities when people assume difference, and show difference when people assume conformity.
Yeah, that could bring us to the issue of sexuality, right? That is also there, and that in many of your works, and there is a proposal that how technology can replace sexual interaction also, right? When thinking of reproduction, for example. And in a way that we could read that sexuality in a way is removed. And then the idea of mortality can be erased as a consequence. And I've seen that in different examples of even the plays and the novels, right? How biotechnology obviously allows the female body to be invaded, right? Also by the masculine. and then the maternity status could be just used for the benefit of the powerful, right? As it happens with surrogacy. But also the idea of transsexuality, right? That appears in, like, for example, with Youngest, that example later, Jasmine, that is castrated. That's something that we wanted to discuss here. And Alia, on the other hand, just went voluntarily, right, under the transsexual transit towards womanhood. We also, or we have Meiji, right? Meiji, who feels comfortable with that synthetic penis, right, in her body. In Layla, we also find a transsexual character who's kind of mean, right? We are pretty much now talking about transsexuality. It would be like a current topic that is actually dividing the feminist movement in a way. So what is your position about that?
Sorry, I just, Antonia, I just would like to point out that that's not from my book, actually. That was
yes,
in the...
that's from the series. Yeah. I just skipped that part, sorry.
No, I'm just saying that that character wasn't something I...
But that's very interesting, right? How that was introduced.
Yeah, it was I mean, it was a surprise to me because I hadn't, it was something that they'd introduced, the script writers. And I mean, I would have felt it was a very fraught territory to step into as a writer myself. I don't know if I would have been made that choice. But the writer, the Urmi Juvekar, the lead writer on the show, she was, she's a brave woman. She was very willing to do that. And I think it harks back to an old tradition in India, actually. She was talking about something this kind of using transsexuals to police women was something that used to happen in India. So she was sort of re-invoking it, or invoking a tradition, an old tradition in India. I wasn't aware of it. So it was something that...
But it was so interesting that that person is the guard of the camp, right? A camp where you're taught how to be a woman, right? How to be the right kind of woman.
Yeah, pure. Yeah, I mean, it is. It was. I mean, I think that the way they did it in the show, I had these purity camps in my book, but I wasn't so explicit about gender because, it was. I think that what they were trying to do over there was, talk about an old Indian tradition or Indic tradition or whatever. I don't, Manjula, were you aware of this, that this happens in India?
What?
I think transsexuals were used to guard police women or guard women in certain ways.
But that's the eunuch of the harem was a very common trope. It's something that we are familiar with, that idea.
I meant like in more contemporary, like more recent times. I don't know.
It's like I wasn't aware of it as something active, but it does not in the slightest bit surprise me. Exactly because of the, it's like in the past, I mean, when the distant past, speaking of a harem, it was understood that they were guarded by eunuchs. But I don't think we even use that. I don't know whether we actually use that term anymore. But I mean, but I will admit that I don't think it is particularly appropriate because, as I write in one of the, it's not a short story. It's a slice of life kind of piece called Morning Glory in East of Kailash, and it refers to a time when I was the guest of a kind of mono-gender household in Delhi, and I found, to my surprise, I didn't think about it. I didn't expect to feel so uncomfortable, to suddenly realize that I was the only person with a clear gender in in a household which was which involved a gay couple, their pre-adolescent son, and a cook who was hoping to be a hijra. That is, he had not actually been cut yet, but he is hoping to be. And perhaps the most creepy feature of this household was the way that this cook, he adored me, okay? And I realized the reason why he was fascinated by me was because I represented to him a kind of, the ideal, not because I am an ideal woman, but just because I am a woman. And that was for me really unpleasant, because I don't think of myself, I don't conduct myself as if I was the representative of an entire gender. I found it really oppressive. And I have for a very long time been conscious that I don't speak Hindi. I speak only English. And one of the problems I had with learning Hindi, I'm not sure that I can explain this accurately, but it comes down to this. In Hindi, there are only two genders, but it's true of French as well. But unlike, say, French, where the verbs, the finite verbs do not express gender, in Hindi, they do. So if you speak as a man, the verb will change if you speak as a woman. And I have often felt that this linguistic divide between the genders in Hindi speak, or any cultures where any languages where that is true of the verb forms, results in a really deep concept that there is a deep difference, a really fundamental difference. Because if I were to speak as a man, if I spoke Hindi, the verb form would change. And I find that annoying and unpleasant whenever I have attempted to speak in Hindi.
But Manjula, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I'm done.
It made me think of a really interesting point in that, when you do hear a transgender speak in Hindi, and I grew up in Delhi, and there was you have a lot of encounters sometimes, you meet them, and it was a way of claiming a gender that society might not have assigned to them, or society might not have believed or assigned to them, or whatever. And it was a way by even someone with very masculine features and masculine traits would claim the Hindi verb for the action they were performing, and say like "मैं कर रही थी" or whatever, and "मैंने किया था," and and it was really interesting to me that they could use real language in that way, and use it to sort of assert themselves in a gender that perhaps other people were not willing to assert themselves, were not willing to give them, and
right.
They claimed it for themselves. I thought language can be useful.
Well, this I have often thought that the gender, how should we say, the turmoil going on in the world of gender in the world today may and should perhaps result in a softening of the boundaries in language, because I've used it in my comic strip where the two little girls ask Suki, the central character, what are the acceptable terms in transgender terms for uncle and aunt and sister and brother, because we have only these. And Suki looks for some answers, but they don't exist in language. And if we want to be truly inclusive, and if we want to blur the boundaries, and I would say the reason we should be wanting to blur the boundaries is not to create confusion, but to soften the hard contours that define people's lives, that force some men who maybe don't want to be masculine in the obvious ways, but who just want to express, or who might not even be gay or want to be transgender, but they are forced by culture, and the same is true of women, to fit into very tight boxes. And to some extent, it's because language does not express blurred boundaries. Even if we found ways of saying she, he, and the various, or using it in a more extended way, or they, you still have words like uncle and aunt and sister and brother,
Like, yeah, completely right. I mean, it's such a problem now. The debate is advancing so fast on Twitter and things like that, and people are like, tell me my, yeah, it's a big problem. You're very right. I think great point.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are reaching almost the end of the discussion as it is. And Manjula, you just said that maybe language needs softening. Before you said that you'd like to hope. And Antonia always has this line, let's see if we can be optimistic and look ahead and construct ahead. And then, Prayaag, you've got this respect to the walls. Let's see if literature somehow can show somehow of reparation. How do you think that literature can illuminate us or offer us some sort of reparative histories? For instance, in this new contemporary India or this transnational situation. For instance, there is always this question that Arundhati Roy was asked once about, can writer be activists or no? And she answered, obviously, writers are activists because they speak about the earth they breathe, how they are called up in the middle of the night by police, and so on. So the last question is, how do you think that your books, literature itself, reading, teaching this, and thinking about that can more or less be some sort of source of reparation or softening of hope and, as Antonia would say, of optimism? What can be? Thank you.
Manjula, should I? Okay.
Yeah, you go ahead, Prayaag.
Okay. It's something that I've thought about a lot, Jorge. So it's a great question. Thank you. I do think, I think when I wrote my novel, my only novel, Naina, it was very much on my mind. I started that in my 20s, and I thought, I can write this book and put in all the stuff that really bothers me about about the country I grew up in and I love, and and then whoever reads it would read it, and then things will start to change. It's all like this kind of ideas that you have that you hope to be able to the impact you hope your work will have, and then the book comes out and it's sort of like it does whatever it has to, but nothing really changes. And it was and of course the hubris of of thinking that you can change something is massive, and then you realize that what you are doing with literature is very much changing people individually, not changing, but touching people on a very individual basis. It's like each reader, each time I get any kind of communication from a reader, well, the nice emails, any kind of communication from a reader, and I think that it's always so gratifying, because you feel that even if you've not been able to change anything about because everything seems to be going to hell in terms of politically in India and things like that, but things seem to be getting worse. But I do feel on a personal level that at least if I've helped a few people look at things that are going on in the country, or look at how they interact with the people around them, then that's something that I'm quite happy with that ambition for my second book. Let's just put it that way. If I can just that I don't know if I can do socially reparative, but just be able to touch people and help people see things. I mean, that for me would be wonderful, and if it can happen with the second book.
For myself, I would say I really do not approach writing as an with the aim of activism, in the sense that I hope I don't use it as a pulpit to address the millions. I write in order to share my visions, my concepts, my ideas and ideals. And what I would hope for, and what I believe literature has done for me, is open windows, open doors, show me avenues of otherness. And it's even the way that when you have a piece of art on the wall, it's like it's a vista. And I can remember standing in my sister's home when she was moving from one house to another city. We took down all the artwork, and suddenly the house it was not merely that the walls were bare. There was no external view, you know. Art opens so many channels. And for me, that is what literature does. I would say that, you know, poetry, a line of poetry can be a lifeline for someone in prison, a bit of song. It's not activism. It at least, you know, it doesn't have to be, it can be, why not? But I believe what literature, what art does, it sweetens our lives. It's not that it teaches, it's not medicine, it's dessert. And sometimes it's pickle, you know, it's painful to eat, but it's still enriching, you know?
Thank you so much. Well, just three practical questions, and the final one. Do we expect a second part for Leila and a third part for the Escape Island novel? Yeah.
For me, yes. I'm writing the third one.
For me, no. Not right now. Definitely. I'm working on something very different.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. I really like the way you finished by saying that literature, art, sweetens our lives. I think it's like a perfect way of concluding this conversation, but we are not concluding it yet, because now is the turn of the audience. The audience, they have been writing questions and comments that I have been writing again in my own papers, and I have divided them in 4 themes. One of them is going to be authorship, the other one science fiction, another one purity, and another one blurred boundaries. Okay? So let's start with the first one. And there are questions and comments relating authorship. Pizada, she says that she celebrates the ambiguity that enables writers to speak truth to authority. And many people in the audience, they were celebrating this, how you writers, you are able to speak truth to authority. And for example, Tarun, he highlights how in Laila, the author is able to interrogate the absurdity of authoritarianism by interrogating the absurdity of present-day reality. And he also used the term re-engineering notions drawn from antiquity. So this could be wrapped up by Maurice's sentence that says that you are like the canary in the coal mine, which I think is great. I can imagine this canary with the yellow color and the coal mine.
And some of us are even tweeting these days.
I thought it was amazing when I saw this. And so the power that you have to speak truth to authority. So let's go to one of the questions regarding science fiction. Tarun, he wants to know the following. When reality itself has become so dystopic, and you have been discussing this, does the template of science fiction need to change? Or does science fiction run the risk of being outrun by the catastrophe afoot, by the real catastrophe afoot? So do you think that you need to change the template of science fiction? What do you think about this?
As someone who writes a lot of science fiction, I would say that for an author, we will never say that the template is going to keep us in. The template is what we make it. It's not made for us. So, they'll maybe find a new way, and all it requires is a change of term. And we have, a new avenue. I resist the notion that there are templates that will cut us off from what we want to do creatively. We will find a way, as it's like Attenborough said of the Jurassic Park, Richard Attenborough of Jurassic Park, his movie. He said with a little twinkle, life will find its way. And I would say literature finds its way, We don't have to be hemmed in by rules of writing. Maybe that's what academics do. Academics try to catch us, we escape.
Good point. Prayaag, you want to add something to this?
No, I mean, I thought Manjula captured it. I mean, what kind of templates is Tarun referring to over here for science fiction? I'm curious about that. What is the original template, and what change does he visualize?
Mm-hmm.
I have a partial. I can't answer for Tarun, but Tarun is the editor of an excellent anthology of South Asian science fiction called the Golank's Book of South Asian Science Fiction, and I have been his, in a sense, his deputy. So we have worked together. We have talked a great deal about science fiction and the boundaries and the limitations and the elasticity. So in a sense, I think I'm just opening that issue up a little bit. But it's something that Tarun and I have talked about a great deal. Antonia, I want to make a point, and I'm laughing because I don't know if Prayaag feels the same way. I prepared a small passage to read out. I don't know if Prayaag did as well. And I feel, especially because one of the issues is blurring of boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if this, I know that we're running out of time, but would it be a good concept to read from our work?
Please do.
Okay, but you're going to ask about blurring of boundaries and and Prayaag, I hope you plan to read as well.
Yeah, I can read, sure.
Okay, good.
You know what we can do? We could just address two more questions, so to give voice to the audience, because I think that's also important. Absolutely. And then we will leave the last 10 minutes to end up with your reading, which I think is a good ending that way, okay?
Okay, that sounds good.
In fact, there has been a dialogue in the chat, because Francisco Javier Crespo, he answers to Tarun about this idea of the science fiction. He thinks that science fiction will catch up. Why? Because dystopian science fiction usually rises in popularity after great catastrophe. So he also addresses how after the Second World War, for example, all these science fiction dystopian novels, they became really popular. So, well, it's also something to add to what you were telling us, Manjula. Regarding purity, Pizzada, she would like you to briefly, well, I say briefly because I'm the chair and it needs to be briefly, to please develop the intersection between gender and purity. Intersection between gender and purity. If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I don't know, Manjula, we've been talking quite a bit about this actually. I don't know, Manjula was spoke very well a little earlier about, even the idea of purity of gender is what is being challenged today so comprehensively, right, all across the world. Or this idea that people can be placed in certain very fixed categories or small categories. And I think, again, there's the idea of purity itself is an idea of safety, that I will be mean, this is one of the things that I talk about in my book. Why do we feel the need to retreat behind walls of cohort, of our own cohort, of people who we feel are like us, in whatever way, whether it's income or it's caste or class or race or whatever. And I think gender, it's one of those other things that it's one of the things that we get a sense of safety by thinking, oh, this person's like us and this person's like us or not like us. And I know that, there's my world makes sense with this. But, as soon as you challenge those presumptions, it becomes very hard for people to feel safe. And, I think that's why people feel so threatened. If you think about in the recent challenges to gender, I think that's why people feel so threatened, is because in the recent challenges to the binaries around gender, I think that's why people feel so threatened by it, because it's an idea that threatens the very existence, our fundamental sense of who we are.
Right.
And talking about these boundaries, the blurred boundaries, let's go to that now. When you were dealing with discussing language and talking about non-binaries, Felicity, she suggests that perhaps non-binary Hindu speakers will invent a new verb form. So perhaps, like, in order to break with that, with the boundaries, perhaps we will have the non-binary Hindi speakers creating a different word, a different verb. And then Tarun also asked about the idea of heterotopia, how the heterotopia, perhaps it will be useful to create non-binary possibilities through unexpected juxtapositions.
Yeah, I mean, these are all possibilities, and maybe, in this sense, again, the academic world will lead the way by helping, I mean, not just the literature departments, but departments of philology, and to create, to make a graceful language, because, the current approach to dealing with non-binary terms, pronouns, I find them awkward. Of course, the awkwardness is only because we are not used to new terms, and new terms in the architecture of speech. It is up to all of us to try and work towards. And here I want to say that the world of emoticons, the electronic world that we are all using, it is showing away. We are using terms that we are using language with just pictures, and maybe by using just pictures we can spread the boundaries a bit. After all, a smiley face is neither male nor female. It's just a smiley face. And if we can forge a language that allows us that elasticity, that would be something wonderful. And when people talk about the dystopias that we write about, there's a lot that we offer which is not dystopic, which is inclusive, and which talks about, even within oppressions, the love, the friendship, the warmth, the human warmth that our characters express to one another. And ultimately, that is our only treasure. The fact that we can be warm towards one another, that we can form associations and bonds, regardless. I mean, the way that so many people, even as we speak, so many people all around the world are able to form deep relationships without even ever having met. This is something to celebrate, surely.
Indeed. So now is the time to listen to you reading your work. So
okay.
The floor is yours now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Antonia, for giving me this, giving us this opportunity, both of us. And I'm sorry if I've kind of insisted that I read, because I have made the effort to find a passage to read. But I think it will suit our discussion very well, and it'll give our audience something something to take away. Okay, so the passage I'm going to read is from The Island of Lost Girls. We have already named the person it'll be about, the character called Youngest. He's traveling in the beyond the boundaries of his origin country with his daughter, but we don't see Meiji. So they are traveling in a world that has been devastated by ecological and social collapse. In order to keep the daughter Meiji, who she's 19, safe, Youngest must send her away. And then he has already, when we enter the novel, submitted to a complete sex change. So it's not just that he looks like a woman, he has been altered so that his body functions like a woman's body, but not the internal organs, just the external organs. Anyway, early in the book, he is befriended by a transgender woman called Aila. I have to point out here, everyone refers to her as Alia, but in fact, in the book, her name is Aila. In this scene, Aila, is helping Youngest to take a shower. It's a slightly science fictional shower, so I'm not going to go describe it, but anyway. And she doesn't speak straightforward language because she's also got, language issues. So she speaks a kind of childlike pidgin. So I'm not going to start reading. So Youngest began unbuttoning the front of his robe. He was feeling very awkward. Ayla did not move away. Instead, she looked expectantly at his hands, clearly wanting to see what he looked like under his clothes. He felt his skin prickling with discomfort. He would have preferred to turn his back on his transgender companion. He guessed, however, that would seem unfriendly. He couldn't know what was considered typical amongst men who had had body-altering surgery, or perhaps even unaltered women. Did women get together to discuss and compare one another's bodies? He had no idea. He delayed the moment of disclosure by pulling his boots off one by one. He stripped away his socks and then his salwar and let them drop away. Then, feeling extraordinarily awkward, he lifted the hem of his robe up and over his head, shaking his hair free as he pulled the garment away. Youngest had always had broad muscular shoulders and a generous belly and limbs like tree trunks. The reconstructive surgery had not given him a waist, but had built on the natural fullness of his body to provide plump, generous breasts and a matching voluptuous bottom. He stepped out of his frilly black briefs, then peeled away the chemise over his head, exposing the faintly glistening aureoles of his brown nipples. He wore no bra. "Ah, yes," said Aila, immediately nodding appreciatively. "It is a good job." She meant the surgeon's handiwork. She leaned in close. "Expensive, no scar." She lightly patted the sides of Youngest's breasts to test for her firmness. "They are quite strong, very attractive." He glanced down at himself, feeling an embarrassment that had become his norm. Looking down at the twin bulges on his own chest, he felt as though he were outraging the modesty of a woman. It was true, they looked good, plump and well-balanced, each with its thickened tip, plum dark and shaped like a paddy farmer's straw hat. Beyond them, he saw the glossy, double-tiered expanse of his own generous belly, but even this was unfamiliar now. He had once had a strip of hair that ran down the middle and over his navel. He had never consciously thought of this frontal mane as a sexual feature until it was no longer there, for him to run his fingers through, to tug at now and then, feeling 1,000 tiny prickles of pain. He felt like a stranger to his own body. It was his, and yet it was completely unfamiliar. It was attractive to him, but a stranger's body, not his own. He felt in awe of it, afraid almost. I'm going to stop there. It goes on, but I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that reading. Should I go? I'm sorry, I don't have anything on blurred boundaries. I've been hunting through the book, but I can't find anything off the cuff. I had chosen, when I started writing the book, the heart of this book was the kind of relationship between Shalini and her daughter Laila, and I think a lot of the book really deals with her memories of her daughter. So at least they're my favorite parts of the book. So I'll just read a little bit, a small section. When I dream about Laila, she is always in the distance, outside the light. But I know she has a warm, open face. I still see her eyes, light like my mother's, irises, warm gold brown pools in which the sun set ablaze, radial chips of malachite, green and faintly black. She is impatient to meet the world, my little girl grown. She is taller than me. This makes me so happy. Sometimes she's in school uniform, walking toe heel, back arched, the proud shoulders and strong nose of all the women in our family. Today she turned 19. Desires, insecurities, angers that I know nothing of, though I must have played my part in. I would know so little about her now. Maybe her laugh. When she was an infant, I'd bring my face right to her nose and make a funny sound. Hush! And she'd squirm with delight, cackling with a deep cadent lilt. Her laughter now will carry a kernel of that. So I come here on her birthday to ask her for forgiveness. We didn't respect these walls, so they took her from me. 16 years. Does she wonder sometimes where I am if I abandoned her? I've read the books. She won't remember. She was taken on her birthday, only 3 years old, so she can't remember. When I think about this, it's like I'm burning on the inside. She would know me if we crossed on the road. To her, I am an emptiness, an ache she cannot understand but yearns to fill. No, I have left more, a glimmer at least. The blurred outline of her face, a tracery of scent, the weight of fingertips on her cheek, the warmth of her first cradle in my arms. I found a journal on early cognition in the library. One article said our first memories go back to 2 in a few months. We don't remember how things flow into each other, how they are linked, but our minds can place in the vast fog discrete islands. Maybe she remembers accompanying me to the mall one winter morning, white framed sunglasses on her head. A Santa greeting the customers walking in. Laila, so thrilled by this, her shoulders began to vibrate.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a lovely passage. It's a beautiful passage.
Yes. Thank you all for this great session. Thank you, Antonia. Thank you, Jorge, especially Manjula. It's been just wonderful interacting with you and talking to you.
Likewise, Prayaag. I feel that AEEII has brought together two people who are from the same country, but we've never met. So,
I think both are reclusive, so there's a good possibility we would never.
So we have needed Spain and the internet in order to meet.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for this platform. Really, it's great.
I really appreciate this. I appreciate all your efforts to be here today with us and having honored us with such a wonderful conversation and readings from your work. I look forward to the new books by both of you, and
right.
Be able to, maybe we'll meet again to discuss those ones.
That's great.
Absolutely.
And we thank the audience for being here. Thank you, everyone who sat through. It's been a long session, but thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Really
and I think we should also thank the gods of the internet.
I've known it. I don't know if it's not so reliable. So.
Carmen, Carmen Escobedo, she has just written in the chat saying that this is the point, breaking obstacles and coming to understanding. And this is what we have been doing this evening, thanks to the four of you. Thank you so much. And it has been like a sweet evening, morning or night, right? No time, no boundaries then.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much for all your efforts. Thank you. Thank you. Because
yes,
this
and
will
also
last.
Raisa, who connected all of us, because I'm always confused about time. I always need to know which day, which time. I always get it wrong. I always make a few mistakes, but Raisa kept us all together. So thank you, Raisa.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right,
Thank
then.
you.
Bye.
Thanks for trusting. Thanks for trusting us. Thanks for trusting us. It was lovely.
Oh,
Thank
that
you.
we have no choice. We have to.
Thank
Okay, bye. Bye.
you.
Have a good night. Good day.
Bye. Good day, good night, Prayaag.
Yeah, I'm off to sleep. Bye.